Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm changing out the AC compressor on my E90 BMW with the N54 motor. It's a 2008. This is a brand new Denso compressor that I purchased on Amazon. It cost about $340. It's not remanufactured, and this is considered an OEM replacement. I purchased this because it's a relatively good price considering it's not remanufactured, and it comes pre-oiled and ready to install on the car. And the reason I'm changing it is because my stock one with 185,000 miles on it, as far as I can tell, let go. This clutch assembly actually just popped out, and I'll show you once we start taking it off on the car. So I was just driving along, and next thing I knew, my AC cut out. It started to feel a little bit humid and warm, and got home, took a look at the compressor, and I noticed that it had let go. And it seems to be a relatively common problem on E90s, not even just with this motor, but other motors on this car. So let's start getting things removed, and I'll show you where the point of failure was. A couple T20s up at the front to remove this air snorkel. I'm going to remove this vacuum line here. We'll just set that aside. We'll go after the actual air filter. Alright, so if you have a factory air box, and you obviously just work on removing that and your factory charge pipe. My car has a couple aftermarket parts, such as the actual charge pipe and inlet, so I don't know if that's going to make things easier or harder for me, but you're just going to want to focus on removing your air box and your charge pipe, factory charge pipe, or aftermarket if you have it, to get some better access to the compressor and to create some room to pull it out afterwards. So I'm going to focus on removing this, and it's pretty straightforward. You can actually watch a couple of my other videos on my channel where I show you how to remove the factory charge pipe. If you watch my intake valve cleaning video, that will give you a good idea, but I'll focus on getting these out of the way now. Now, because I have an aftermarket inlet, it's kind of flexible, and I can get it out of my way without a lot of work. So I'm just going to zip tie it out of the way. What I noticed right after the actual compressor let go is I could smell freon, and it smelled like it had a slow leak. So it's sat for about 2 days since this happened. Here at the low pressure port, basically empty now. There's nothing in there, and it evacuated itself naturally. You know, like, it would have been great if it didn't leak out, so I could take it to shop and have it recovered, but by the time I even checked on it, there was nothing in there. So I guess you can expect that if your compressor lets go, if the clutch lets go on it, it's probably going to leak the gas in there, just as an FYI. But that's pretty good clear access to the compressor. I have to figure out access to the front of the compressor and removing the belt, so I'll probably have to take that fan shroud out, which is never fun, but it's going to be a must in this instance. Alright, so to remove the fan shroud, we're going to remove this electrical connector and just tuck it in here. T30 Torx bit up here to remove. I've removed that one screw up here. If you look down in here, your charge pipe actually clips onto the actual fan shroud right there. So we have to be able to pull that forward to get access. There we go. Relieve that off there. So now we gotta go underneath the car and remove one screw, which I'll show you. So I'm underneath the car now and looking at the splash shield. I'm just gonna loosen these screws and lower the shield down. You don't have to remove the shield altogether to be able to get access to where we need to be. So I'll get these removed and I'll show you what to do next. Alright, so I just removed the screws up at the front of the bumper and then the screws over here. So I could just sneak it down enough to get access to this screw right here on the transmission cooler. I'm going to pop that loose and then we'll be able to pull the fan shroud out from the top. Alright, now we'll try to remove the fan shroud. Next up, you want to get a T60 Torx. Use a small extension. I have my inlet just pushed down a little bit and a long breaker bar so that we can rotate this and take the belt tension off. Alright, so we're going to take the tension off from the alternator. Alright, so we're off the compressor now. I'm going to start getting things out of the way. This bracket is in the way for now, and we'll carry on. I'm going to pull these two 13s off. I'm going to remove this electrical connector. There's two AC lines here that are ready to remove. I've disconnected the battery so that I can get this out of the way. This is a positive connection to your alternator. It's going to get in the way. Now, there's two 6mm Allens. Popping the AC lines off now. I'll just quickly wrap them. Here's where we're at. We've popped off those two AC lines. Now I'm going to start going after the three 13mm bolts that hold it down. I'm going to try a ratcheting wrench right here. Relatively easy to pop free. And there's actually one that I can't show you, but we can get it from the front side. I'll pass the wrench through and I'll show you where it is on the new compressor. So we've gotten this one, but we got to kind of from the front come in here and get that to that one. A quick FYI, this line here that goes to the charge pipe, down here I have an aftermarket intercooler, so that looks a little different. For you it could be just a clamp. You may have to go down to your intercooler and unclip it to be able to get this right out of the way, but it'll make life a lot easier with regards to moving that last bolt. So I'm going to take this pipe right out of the way by removing that clamp. So I have this bolt out now. I actually removed that pipe and there's very little access, so I couldn't use my ratcheting wrench. I used this to just kind of get on that bolt and go down to loosen it. It was only a couple turns before it was finger tight, which was nice. So now I just have two more bolts up at the top, which I've already cracked free. It just has enough room to come out, which is nice. Now we're just resting on this one here. So I brought it forward, I brought it this way, and then I backed it out here because there's a good clear spot wide enough to get it out. Here it is. Here's the carnage. Not sure why this happens. you can see how that's supposed to look and how this one ended up. Appears to be mechanical failure internally, which is a little nerve-wracking. It was perfectly cold and legit, working fine until it decided to fail. And when it decided to fail, it just was instantly gone, no longer functioning. I don't see any shavings in the ports. I don't see anything super concerning. What I'm going to do, I'm changing the receiver dryer, and I'll verify. If I see particulate on the receiver dryer, then I'll have to use my compressor to blow out the lines and check the expansion valve. But for now, I'm going to proceed with doing the dryer as my next step, which I'll show you. This bracket has to be moved over to the new compressor, so I'm going to pop those off. I just found a T25 that fits in there, but it's probably like a 3mm Allen. So I'm going to pop those out, move it over to the new compressor. Next up, I'm going to try to push the radiator back to get to the dryer. So there's just two T50 Torx plastic pegs that hold the assembly. Alright, I've had to drop my intercooler and remove a couple screws that hold the radiator to the actual condenser, just so that I could get enough room to get the actual dryer off the condenser. I popped my grill out so I can show you guys, but if you see right there at the top of the condenser, that can be unscrewed and we can change the actual receiver dryer that's integrated into the actual condenser. So I'm gonna pop that free and then push back enough to be able to slide it out. But just so you know, you have to drop your intercooler and unclip the radiator from the bottom. There's a couple brackets like this that snap into place. I'll show you when I'm putting things back together. But it's important, if your car is being exposed or your compressor failed, then we're gonna need to make sure that there's not excessive shavings at the actual condenser. If there is, then I may not be able to get away with just changing the compressor without changing the condenser, because you can't really flush this. So I'm going to pop that sticker off on the top there and then unscrew this, and then I'll show you when I'm pulling out the actual receiver element, the descant element. So I was able to unscrew the top, that piece right there. I just used a 6mm Allen, but it looks to be a Torx. Either way it worked. And there's a snap ring. Looks like you need snap ring pliers to remove that, which I'm going to try now. Really hard to show on camera, but I've removed that snap ring. I basically stuck my pick tool, slid it over in such a way that I could pop it out, and then I got the rest by hand. So that's being removed from the top now. This should slide straight up. I just was able to lift it up high enough to be able to pull that bag out, so I'm going to try pulling it out from the top now. So this is actually what was inside my compressor, the oil. I dumped it out just so I can measure how much I may have to remove from the new one. As you can see, there's a negligible amount. The new compressor comes with enough oil to, based on you replacing the compressor, it's usually 4 to 5 ounces. But if you have a whole bunch that comes out of your old compressor, you're supposed to dump it out. As you can see here, it's all gray and metallic and there's shavings in there, so I have to flush. That's not a good sign. I pulled the desiccant bag out of the actual condenser and it has some metal shavings on it, but not much, not in terrible shape. I have a new one, and this has a screen in it actually, luckily, that catches metal particulate. It had some in there and I actually clean that up. So now we got to flush the lines. So I popped this line off here. I took off the expansion valve, and in here the oil's clean. That's a good sign. So it did stop. It didn't make it into the evaporator. and it didn't really even make it into the condenser lines. It just made it into the desiccant bag and that filter from what I could tell. But I'm still going to flush all the lines. I've taken some of the lines out so I can manually flush them. And I will flush the evaporator just to be safe, and then I'll be ready for reassembly. It's definitely a required step. So I'll go ahead and flush the condenser and I'll let you know what came out of it. Alright, so I've used this flush kit here, and you know, that's something that fell in the container, but beyond that, that's from the AC condenser and the AC lines. My big line was actually clean and there's a yellow fluid in there. The small thin line actually had debris in it, and my expansion valve and evaporator were crystal clean, so it didn't really get past what appears to be this filter in the actual condenser. So I'm going to assemble this desiccant pack in here. I've topped up the condenser with about an ounce of PAG oil, just considering what was lost from the condenser, and I lubricated the shaft here so when I insert this it won't be going in dry, and I'm going to get that reassembled. To give you an idea, this is the other line that comes out of the condenser, and just a quick flush on the one side was like crystal clean. So that filter at the bottom of the desiccant on the dryer actually catches everything. So technically it does a really good job of keeping the system clean and stopping anything from going inside your evaporator. Alright, so I was running out of time and had to kind of jump ahead here, but I pulled my radiator out just to make reinstallation of the condenser a lot easier. So if you follow DIY on radiator removal. But yeah, so just depending on if your compressor actually seized up and potentially had shavings go into the condenser, you may or may not need to pull it out of the car like this. You could flush from there technically, but to get to this desiccant bag, it was easier to just remove the condenser in my case. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the compressor now, the new one. I've replaced the intercooler and the radiator now. I put the fan shroud back in place, and I'll show you guys recharging the system. Alright, so I topped off the coolant. I'll run the bleed procedure when I get the battery reconnected. But for now I got my manifold gauge set ready. I'm going to connect to the high and low side. Now we're gonna make sure both of these are closed and connect the vacuum pump to this to pull a vacuum for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and see if it holds a vacuum. If it holds a vacuum, we'll run it for an hour to evaporate any moisture and it'll be ready to fill. Alright, so I got my vacuum pump connected. We're gonna open these up. You don't have to go all the way. Just enough to depress the Schrader valve. We're good. Now we're going to turn on the vacuum pump, and then we'll crack open both sides and see if the vacuum starts to pull. Alright. Just performing a bleed procedure, considering I had the rat out. I put fresh coolant in there, so it gave it a good flush. I've had the car sitting for about 20 minutes now, or 15 minutes, and it's holding perfect vacuum. So that's a good sign. I'm going to go ahead and reopen the valves and let the vacuum pump run for 1 hour just to boil out any potential moisture in the system. Alright, so we've vacuumed the system out now, and I'm ready to start charging. This is 12 ounces of freon. The car needs 20.8 ounces, so the can is 15.4. So that means there's 12 ounces of fluid in there, and there's 3.4 ounces of can. And with this adapter on there, it is 16.7 ounces total, including the adapter. Just as an FYI, if you see there, the system calls for 1 pound, 1.3 pounds. So when you convert that to ounces, that's 20.8. So that's 16.7. When we're on the second can, we want that to read 7.9, and we are done. We'll have a perfect charge. So I'm going to go ahead and empty that whole can into the system now. It's still under vacuum, I'll show you. Still under a heavy vacuum, so we're in good shape there. I'm going to connect this yellow hose to that, and then we'll start charging. So I'm just piercing this can now. These things work best when they're kept upside down from experience. Now we have to purge the air in the actual charge line. So you want to face it away from yourself and just press this until you see the cloud. There you go. Now we can actually charge through the low side, which I can do with this can. And the vacuum in the system will start to pull in. And then we're going to start the car to empty that can out. Now I'm going to go ahead and start the car. That'll allow the AC to run. It's taking the charge. You can see the freon going through the sight glass. Alright. That's it. It's pretty much empty now. So I'm going to close that off. And I'll set up with the new can. Okay, we're going to pierce the new can and purge the actual charge line again. Now we're going to open this gauge up here, but we don't want to empty that can right out. So let it take in freon. Stop it. We want this to weigh 7.9. be sure, I'm going to close this off and disconnect the line. Almost there. Very tiny bit needed. So I was aiming for that to say 7.9. I'd say that's as close as I want to come. Pressures are looking good. It's about 80 something degrees in here and it's very humid today, like 90 plus relative humidity. A little over 200, a little under 40. Those look pretty good to me. I'm gonna go check the vent temps. So I'm just let it sit here idle on level 3 on the fan, and I'm in the green. Just at idle, which is perfect. I'm gonna go take it for a drive now. So there's the end result, right at the bottom of the green. So we're in the high 30s. It's pretty much ice cold, feels awesome. So that's gonna conclude this video. Shows you how to change out your compressor on your E90 and specifically on an N54 motor. If you do have it let go, if you notice that your clutch completely explodes like it happened on my car, it's because the compressor seized up and the pulley released. And you're going to want to flush your AC lines and your condenser. You may not have to remove it, but just keep that in mind. So hopefully you guys found this video useful, and thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content like this.